there. A coach talking about his fighter like that in a public interview in front of tens of thousands of people. I don't know why he was talking in the interview instead of Strickland, but maybe he did. I mean, I can only imagine the head coach had to have talked to Strickland before going on an interview. And I don't know if that means he's done working with Strickland, because he did say, where is his motivation? Does he want to be a champion or not? I'm here to train champions. He was questioning that about Strickland. And because I can't imagine he's doing that to his fighter and he's still going to be coaching him. Unless this is a way for him to push Strickland to be a better fighter. Because Strickland did not listen to him in the fight with Dricus. And Dricus even said the same thing. Before the fight, when they asked Dricus about Alex Pereira being in Sean Strickland's corner, Dricus said it's not going to matter because he doesn't even listen to his own coaches. Do you guys remember that?
He was in the corner in the first fight too. I mean, they don't even speak the same language. It doesn't really make it much of a difference whether he's in the corner. I mean, Strickland can barely understand his own coach. He's also American. How's he going to understand Alex Pereira?
He said he doesn't even listen to his own coaches. Alex is not going to make a difference. And look what happened. Every round, Eric Nicksick is giving him solid technical advice. He's telling him exactly what he needs to do better in the fight. I don't know if it was enough for him to win, but he might have performed better. Dricus was 100% right. Strickland would not listen to his coaches. Alex wasn't going to make a difference. Sean Strickland's coach, Eric Nicksick, had amazing coaching between rounds. Like, he did a flawless job of giving Strickland advice, telling him what he needed to do to win the fight. He talked about all the mistakes he was making. He was talking about Dricus' mistakes and how he would have to capitalize on all those. And in the fifth round, where Strickland's down 4, he needs to win by knockout. He even gave him the sentimental talk as well. Like, he was telling him, you're the only guy that can do this. You have to go out there and knock him out. You're the only one. And nothing was getting to Strickland. Nothing. He said everything he needed to say, and everything he was saying was correct. The strengths and weaknesses, the technical advice, tell him that you got to push the pace, you got to throw more punches. Like, everybody agrees with what Eric Nicksick was saying. He's a very good coach. He's very smart. It's just, it went in one ear and out the other. Before the broken nose, after the broken nose, nothing was getting through to Sean Strickland. Now, some people might point out the staph infection, but his coach did say that Strickland was not affected by a staph infection, and he didn't gas out. But again, it's not the first time he fought so defensive like that. I mean, he fought like this against Paulo Costa, Alex Pereira, Dricus in the first fight. Not as defensive, but he still fought defensive. Jared Cannonier, just many, many fights throughout his career, and especially the latest fights against the highest level of competition. When he's fighting lower level guys like Uriah Hall or Abus Magomedov or even like Jack Marshman, Brendan Allen earlier in his career, he'll be aggressive against those guys, but maybe against the best fighters in their prime. He wants to fight more defensive against them, right? Even though when he is offensive in those fights, it works for him. He lands a lot more meaningful punches when he's going forward. And now because of that performance, Sean Strickland's getting a lot of criticism from fans, fighters, and now even his head coach after the fight. Eric Nicksick, the guy that was giving him all that advice in the corner, trying his best to get his fighter out there to win, went on an interview with Ariel Helwani and gave his opinions about it. You know, he expressed his frustrations with his fighter, and I don't think he should have done that. He was being honest with him, right? He was being honest. And what he was saying was correct, but at time and place, right? I think that kind of talk should be with Strickland himself, not with the media. And that's probably his last title shot of his career. I think that frustrates his coach a lot because his coach was talking about that he's trying to train championship fighters. Like, he's trying to make fighters champions. And he was questioning Sean Strickland's motive. He literally asked, like, what is he in this for? He said if he's in this to make money, he said for himself that he's there to make champions, not for money fights. It was almost like he gave Sean Strickland an ultimatum. I don't know if that means that he'll stop being his coach if Strickland doesn't care to go for the belt. Because the thing about that is Strickland said before he didn't care about the belt, right? But Eric Nicksick was always with him all the way. I guarantee he wanted to be champion, right? Who doesn't? Everybody wants to be champion. Anybody who says who they don't want to be champion and they mean it, like Kevin Holland, are coping. Especially as Strickland got closer to the belt, of course he wanted to be champion. Maybe when you're so far away from it, you don't think about it as much. You can kind of cope with yourself like, I don't need it, right? I could just fight how I'm fighting. But then when, Strickland became one of the top contenders, he was probably thinking like, maybe I can actually win that belt, right? He was close. The closer you get to that belt, the more you want it. It proves that you are one of the best in the world. You make a lot more money, and it does prove the fighter's hard work throughout all of those years. If you become a world champion, that is eternal, right? Forever you will be known as a champion. I think Strickland has a lot of potential. He's very talented. People talk about his grappling and his wrestling so much, but he rarely ever shoots takedowns. And when he does, it looks decent, man. He actually has solid wrestling skills, but fights with the jabs and teeps for most of his fights. He could just throw the right hand. He can up his volume more jabs, right? Doubling up on jabs a lot more, or throwing more leg kicks and stuff like that. Not like a drastic change to his fighting style, but whether we agree or disagree with Eric Nicksick coming out on an interview voicing his opinions and frustrations of Strickland, right? I don't think he should have done the interview like that. I think he should have just talked to Strickland instead, but this could be a way for him to get through to Strickland. Like he would have to do an interview and go to the media in order to actually push Strickland to become a better fighter. Could it be that he's that frustrated with him that he just can't get through to Strickland? So maybe if he goes on an interview and voices his opinions and frustrations of Strickland, then maybe he will change and become a better fighter. Or was he just wrong for going on an interview and should have just talked to Strickland backstage and voiced his opinions with him? But I would think that his head coach would talk to him about that. I mean, he was talking to him in between rounds, that you have to go out there and knock this guy out. His words to him are not going to get through. I mean, we saw it in the fight. In between rounds, Strickland wasn't even listening to his coach. Strickland brought in Alex Pereira for his training camp and didn't change anything. In fact, was even more defensive when that wasn't the fix from the first fight with Dricus. He needed to be more offensive. He needed to throw more punches, throw more jabs, throw more kicks, and counterpunch, which Eric Nicksick actually said. His head coach said that the game plan was to counter Dricus. He was talking in between rounds, nothing was getting through to Strickland. And the thing is, he fights every fight like this. Some fighters, no matter if Alex Pereira is in your corner, Eric Nicksick is in your corner, he can bring in all the best coaches in the world. I think it would not have any impact on the way Strickland fights. He will fight his fight no matter what, unless he sees a moment to go for the knockout like he did against Abus Magomedov, which is one of the few times in his career where he adapted to the fight. But most fighters at the top of the middleweight division now are not going to gas out after one round. And most of them can actually fight 5 rounds. So if they're not slowing down and that's the only way Strickland would try to get the knockout, then Strickland's probably always going to be throwing jabs and front kicks and never deviate away from that. Never add new techniques, never try to wrestle or throw head kicks more or whatever it is, right? Counterpunch more. And the thing is, Strickland's fought that way for most of his career ever since he was at welterweight. There's a few outliers in fights like when he fought Nasruddin Imavov on short notice at a higher weight class, or when he fought Abus Magomedov or Uriah Hall, which is still one of his best performances. There are moments where he will go for the knockout, but that's usually when the other fighter is slowing down. You know who Sean Strickland kind of reminds me of? Leon Edwards. Very talented, has a lot of potential, but just fights like they're sparring. And you heard it all the time from fighters who've trained with Strickland. How many times have fighters talked about Strickland's insane grappling, but he never shoots takedowns? He has the skills, but for some reason chooses not to use them, or to even listen to his coaches and using his other skills. But before we go to Eric Nicksick's interview, this video is sponsored by Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm and now an official partner with the UFC. And just like the athletes fight in the cage, Morgan & Morgan will fight for you if you need them for any kind of personal injury case. Morgan & Morgan is giving away 2 tickets to the Alex Pereira and Magomed Ankalaev fight in Las Vegas, plus $2,000. You get a chance to win by going to MorganUFC.com, a dream for any UFC fan. And all you have to do is click the link in the description below or head to MorganUFC.com/Weasel to enter the contest and to see if you can win. It'd be awesome to see you guys there.
Oh, it was just uninspired fighting to me. It just seemed like he was sleepwalking, you know. Yeah, it was tough, man. I was just trying to dig him out of it. Through the rounds. I didn't know if he was trying to collect data in the beginning or if it was just a slow start or what was going on. But as the rounds began to progress, I can just tell that it just didn't feel like he was in it the way most of the times that he is. So yeah, it was tough, man. It was tough 25 minutes to travel all the way out there. Man, let's not forget this is a title fight, and I take these title fights very seriously. And just I don't know. I was just disappointed, man. I was disappointed with the whole entire outcome, the whole fight as a process. Just thought it was just kind of flat.
And yeah, Eric Nicksick is right. It was an underwhelming performance. He wasn't really trying to go out there and knock this guy out or anything, but at the same time, Eric Nicksick is saying that it's not the way he usually fights. No, this is the way Sean Strickland usually fights, right? I mean, he fought Paulo Costa like this. His last fight was very similar to this one. I think Eric sees Strickland in the gym sparring so much where he's like trying to knock out his sparring partner and thinks sometimes that will go into the fight too. He's shown that in fights a few times, like against Abus Magomedov or Nasruddin Imavov, but usually he fights like the way he fought Dricus or Paulo Costa. I guess the disappointing thing about it was he didn't adapt. He didn't try to adapt and win in a title fight.
Were you expecting that? Was there any part of you that thought this might happen?
No, I really didn't. I didn't. Like, just Sydney's good vibes, good juju, everything that went on out there last time with Israel, I thought it was like the place to be. I was very happy about that situation, getting back out there to fight. And getting the rematch with Dricus. I think there was things that we worked on all camp that were better than the last time around. We had a feel of what Dricus was going to implement. So I was very excited for it, man. I was so just for that type of performance, it was just very underwhelming.
I don't know how his head coach didn't think that Strickland would have fought this way. I mean, he's fought this way in his last fight, but I think also some credit has to be given to Dricus as well, because Dricus was very aggressive in the fight. He was throwing a lot of offense, showed how great his cardio was, and Strickland usually reacts by moving away from his opponent, mummy guarding, which is like extending both of his arms out forward. A very defensive fighting style whenever his opponent is very aggressive against him. And he was talking about the Adesanya fight. Well, Adesanya doesn't really fight like that. Adesanya likes to counter-strike a lot of times, and he was moving back away from Strickland, which allowed Strickland to be the one who was more aggressive in the fight, establishing his own offense to win. Against Dricus, it's not as easy as that, because Dricus isn't backing up like Adesanya does. Dricus was the one that was controlling the pace of the fight, whereas when Strickland fought Adesanya, Strickland was the one controlling the pace. It's usually the fighter who's moving forward that's controlling the pace.
It just was a very underwhelming performance in an opportunity to fight for a title. There's people in this sport that never even realize that potential to ever even be an opportunity to fight for a championship. That should be enough to get you motivated, to get you off the couch. It just, to me, was we didn't perform. So that's all. It's on all of us. It's on me as a coaching staff. It's on Sean, and I think he needs to evaluate what he wants to do in this sport. If it's just to make money, then that's great. Let us know. I want to coach world champions. So my motivations are different. So I think that just to kind of show up and do that and not really back it up, just to me was just kind of uninspiring.
Now, that's a big statement from his head coach. It sounds like he's giving Strickland an ultimatum. He's telling him, what do you want to do? Do you want to be the champion, or you want just money fights? Because if you want just money fights, I'm not here for that. I'm here to train fighters to become a champion, which is admirable. It just sounds like he's not as in it for the money as maybe some other coaches would be, wanting their fighter to go for money fights instead. But I don't think he should have been saying that in an interview, right? That part you could actually talk to Strickland about. Eric Nicksick could do whatever he wants, right? He can train with Strickland if he wants or not, of course, but to put that out publicly like that, it looks like he's trying to put pressure on Strickland. It kind of sounds like he wants Strickland to push himself to become a champion and change his fighting style. Strickland's always voicing his opinions. He's always playing with the media. He's always having these big interviews, and maybe his coach is taking that same kind of approach here, taking it to the media, trying to get him to change as a fighter to become a world champion. It could be that, or he could just be throwing his fighter under the bus.
What is going through your mind as you're watching this unfold? Like you say, you travel all the way across the world. You're with the guy, second shot to try to beat this guy, to win back the belt, and you could see you could hear your frustration building. They kept going back to you in the corner, and you're being brutally honest. You're telling him it's too predictable. You got to go. You got to get a finish. Every time it was building up. But as you're going back to the corner for those 5 minutes, and you're watching this, what's going on inside? What are you thinking?
Just he's kind of checked out. That's kind of what I'm thinking. It's like, you're grasping at straws at that point. You're just trying to get him to do something. My dad used to always say in football, is like, you got to get something, get the band playing, right? Get the crowd and get motivated, get the momentum on your side again, So I'm asking for anything. The jab and the teep aren't going to win the fight. It's like if you have a predictable offense and you run this slow paced offense in football and you get down by 30, you don't have the ability to come back and win those games. So you have to take risks. You have to make something creative happen, and just jabbing and teeping your way to a comeback win wasn't there. So it's like, dude, find a same side head kick, throw some knees up the middle. So throw something different that's not predictable to what Dricus has seen for the last 9 rounds, so we have to mix it up.
Yeah, and there it is, The way that Strickland fights, he needs to be winning the fight in order to get the decision. He's not a comeback fighter because he can't knock you out throwing jabs and teeps. And he's essentially voicing his frustrations with Strickland there.
No, I felt like that's a typical Sean corner usually. Like he's just kind of hard to like address, like he's just kind of moves around, doesn't make a lot of eye contact. So there's times I'm like grabbing him, like, "Hey man, look at me." But that's typical Sean. That's when we're winning or losing. That's kind of him in the corner. So whether he was not really listening or taking on the content that we were giving him was one thing. But no, I felt like he was listening, and like he was responsive to like after one round. I remember he's like, "All right, I'm getting my timing. I got my timing." And I'm like, "Dude, like we don't want to be giving rounds away, especially after the first experience, right? Like it was such a close fight that giving round 1 away was scary enough for me. I'm like, I don't want to give any rounds away, let alone 1 and 2. So now we're fighting, we have to come back and really, we don't have that like one hitter quitter comeback mentality with Sean. So, you know, that to me was just kind of like, well, we're going to have to try to start doing something different.
Yeah, that's a very good point too. The first Dricus fight was way too close, and that was a big thing coming out of that fight. And then, according to his coach here, after the second round, Strickland said that he's getting his timing down. We don't want to feel out any rounds. We want to win all of these rounds. The first fight was way too close. We cannot let that happen again. And now, it's like he fought even more defensive in the rematch. It honestly seemed like for most of the fight, he was trying to get his time, not just the first round. Because he didn't change the way he fought in the first that he did in like the third or fourth.
Can I ask, what was the game plan?
Well, there was a lot of things that I think that we did well in the first fight that we could build on. And some of those things were, you know, was when Dricus shot on us, we were leaving our hips behind. So we wanted to get away from leaning and leaving our hips there for Dricus to be able to take us down pretty easily. But if we did get taken down, there were some opportunities for us to be able to hit the switch and get on top. You know, if you go back and watch the Brad Tavares fight, Brad was able to get on top and utilize some ground and pound and ride Dricus a little bit, get some control time. So it wasn't necessarily for us to wrestle or try to shoot on Dricus, but it was that opportunity, like if there was a wrestling exchange, that we want to be able to get on top. The other thing was, and I think I might have said in the corner, was I wanted to interrupt Dricus's combinations. Dricus tends to have holes in his defense within the combinations. You see him leaving his hands behind. So in that kind of chaos there, that's where I wanted him to counter or try to create something in between the combinations. When the combinations are over, Dricus tends to have better defense, high shield, high guard. And then how do we attack it from there? So there is a number of things that like we really worked on and drilled that, you know, honestly, just, you know, that didn't really get out of him in that fight. It just felt kind of flat, you know? So, yeah, it was tough, man. It was tough to watch.
That's very interesting. I love hearing the game plans from coaches because they're the ones that usually come up with the game plans and the fighters fight by those. So it seemed like a lot of the game plan here is to counter Dricus, whether it's him shooting takedowns and Strickland countering him with the switch getting on top, right? Not just leaning back so he could shoot takedowns, right? Let's counter his takedowns and get on top. But Dricus didn't wrestle as much. So the fight turned into more of a striking match. Maybe that threw off Strickland because Strickland was drilling to prepare himself for the wrestling and Dricus was striking for most of the fight. So that could have an impact in the way Strickland was fighting. Maybe Dricus just threw him off with his own game plan. And the other part is the one that, oh man, it's so frustrating to watch sometimes. Counter-punching Dricus's combinations. He is so defensively open. And Strickland's coach is saying that they trained for that. They trained to counterpunch him. But fighters don't counterpunch Dricus that much. Strickland did a few times in the fight, but it didn't seem like it was a game plan with how many times he was counterpunching. Because Dricus was throwing all the combinations forward. He was blitzing down, throwing big haymakers and overhands and stuff. And a lot of what Strickland was doing was just blocking and moving away. Eric Nicksick said exactly what I pointed out in my breakdown. It's much harder to land punches on Dricus when he's sitting still because he has a really good guard. He shells up on punches well, but he's a lot more open when he's throwing punches. And the counter openings are there, but no one seems to be punching at him. So it might just be something unique with Dricus, or just it might be someone like Hamzat or Imavov or someone else to actually throw these counter punches and land those shots on Dricus. But it's great to hear that at least Strickland's coach understood the weaknesses of Dricus.
Did that result happen because Sean didn't bring it, or because Dricus is such a tricky puzzle that Sean couldn't figure out how to bring it?
I'd say a little bit of both. You know, I think once Dricus realized, probably maybe in the first fight, that, you know, he didn't necessarily respect Sean's power. It just was accumulation of volume. I would say like death by 1,000 paper cuts. That I think that he didn't really, you know, he didn't realize or feel like he had any risk, right? So I think Dricus, he went first a lot of the times. He led the dance a lot of the times. He just did that with volume. I mean, he didn't do really anything different, but he did everything that he needed to do just to get a win.
I mostly agree with what he's saying there. You know, besides that, Dricus, yeah, he was striking very similarly. I think he was throwing a lot more kicks in this fight than he was in the first fight. But yeah, he was blitzing with combinations. He was still throwing power punches. He was trying to overwhelm Strickland with volume, which seems to be the big trend in MMA right now. Cardio fighting is what I like to call it. Merab, Bilal, now Dricus, like these guys just throw constant offense and rely on their cardio to never gas out. But the thing about Dricus is he has punching power to go with it. So it makes it even harder to fight against than maybe Bilal striking or Merab striking, you know? This guy has the volume, the cardio, and punching power, which is very rare. But the thing is, Dricus didn't wrestle. He shot like 1 takedown in the fight, whereas in the first fight, he shot way more takedowns. So it was a different game plan from Dricus, but I do think it stems off of what Eric Nicksick just said, that Dricus understood later in the first fight that he didn't have to respect Strickland's power. So in the second fight, he fought that same way, right? He carried like the 4th and 5th rounds from the first fight and continued to fight that way in the second fight, knowing that Strickland's not going to try to knock him out. So he could just overwhelm him with volume.
Right? Like I even said to Dricus after the fight, man, like, I wish we would have given you a better fight. Like you deserved a better fight than that, you know? So he didn't have to do much. I felt like Dricus kind of saw the way Sean was fighting, and he minimized every risk that he had to take and just did his job and got out of there 25 rounds scot-free. Or 25 minutes, you know, right, without really getting hurt.
And he also essentially just said that Dricus had an easy win. You know, he wished that they were able to give him a better fight and said that Dricus just ran away with the win. Imagine being a fighter and your coach says that about the fight. It's like, dang. Is he wrong, though? Is he wrong? I mean, it seems like Eric Nicksick's a straight shooter, which is the kind of coach I think a lot of these fighters need. It may be crazy, but maybe he's saying this in the interview to try to get through to Strickland, because it seems like him talking to Strickland's not getting through to him. So maybe he's talking in this interview in a way to get to Strickland, like, yo, you really need to change up your fighting style here. If you're losing a fight, you have to try to get the knockout. Everyone wants to see that, right? Fans want to see him to try to get that comeback knockout if he's losing a fight. His coaches definitely want to see it. He wants that as well, most likely, right? There seems to be some kind of mental block for Sean Strickland. He just can't change the way he fights. And it's crazy because he fights in a way that's opposite of the way that he talks. He talks chaotically, but then he fights in the most like uniform, ordered, and defensive way. It's completely opposite of what it seems like his personality is like. I don't know. Looks like Dricus, Hamzat, maybe even Imavov, and maybe Caio Borralho. Like, these 4 guys might be the next top fighters in this division. And it's just like his coach said, if Strickland does not change up his fighting style, they're all going to know how to beat him. Strickland needs to make a lot of changes in his fighting style. The jab and the teeps are great, but he needs to add more to it. Maybe wrestle more, right? Maybe go for takedowns. He's gotten some takedowns in his career. He actually has decent wrestling, but just rarely ever goes to it. He doesn't counterpunch that much. Sean Strickland has a lot of potential. He is talented, but there's like some kind of mental block that's stopping him from being the best fighter he can be. Because you could see the potential out of him. You can see he can do a lot more in these fights. And it's crazy he became a champion off of jabbing and teeping, right? You can see a lot more out of him, man. Imagine him doubling up on jabs and throwing an uppercut or throwing out more high kicks or whatever it is, you know? If a fighter becomes a champion, mostly jabbing and teeping and having good solid defense, that's very rare. You don't see fighters do that. You don't see fighters reach the pinnacle of the sport doing that when he could do so much more in these fights, right? Where's the check left hooks? Where's the double jabs into the uppercuts? Where's the high kicks? Going to the clinch, landing elbows and knees and all this stuff. Like, there's so many weapons that I guarantee he's trained and sparred with, but just doesn't use them in a fight. It's almost like Leon Edwards. When you watch Sean Strickland fight, it's almost like you're watching Leon. But imagine a version of Leon that's way more limited. Does that mean he just doesn't have as many tools as Leon? Or is he limiting himself that much? And both these guys became champions. Both these guys are talented. They have a lot of potential, but they both fight like they're sparring. But I don't know, man. Do you guys agree with Eric Nicksick? Do you think that he was correct for speaking on Ariel's show? Do you disagree with that? Do you agree with his frustrations of Sean Strickland and the points that he made? And what do you think is next for Strickland? Obviously not what Ariel was saying. Ariel's saying he should fight Michel Pereira and top 15 guys. Dude, Strickland's still a top 5 fighter. Why is Ariel saying he should fight top 15? No. Sean Strickland should be fighting like Robert Whittaker or Nasruddin Imavov, someone like that. Not anyone from the top 15. He should be fighting top 5 guys.